I'll admit to something no other YouTuber will. I was jealous of other channels. Sickeningly jealous. I'll come back to why, but this lasted for months until I read a certain match from Blue Lock with advice and examples from multiple characters and scenes, some of which were completely unexpected, and applying it myself turns this crippling, crushing weight into my greatest asset and skyrocketed my channel. I'll be using YouTube as an example, one because I like to talk from experience, and two because it's something everyone watching will understand immediately, but this can apply to anything you'd like it to. And whatever the first thing to pop into your mind just now was, remember it throughout this video. It's going to be important. Okay, Demonetized Munchen vs Manshine City starts in chapter 174. However, we need to go back a few chapters to 170, which introduces us to muscle-bound maniac Chris Prince. And initially this guy seemed like he's not all there. To be honest, he's showing off the camera, he's feeling everyone's muscles to determine their playstyles. Apparently this is a thing he can do, and quite accurately at that. However, no one on Manshine City is particularly convinced by him, and neither was I at first. But shortly after, he says, "I can see how you got this far, but let me say this, all of you rely too much on your talents. And when you don't take care of your talent, it withers." Okay, sounds obvious, right? But he's not talking about practicing. He's talking about taking care of it. And it's this next panel that really got the gears turning in my head. We all naturally have things we're talented at, and that does include you, as we'll come back to, but the analogy Prince gives here is fantastic. He talks about someone who, for example, was born as a naturally gifted runner, but decides to improve their strength to become bigger and stronger. However, this just isn't what their talent is, causing them to slow down and perform worse. And why would someone do that? If speed is their talent, why work on their strength? Of course, there's a time and place to work on your weaknesses, namely if it really gets in the way of your strengths, but what Prince is talking about here, or at least the way I read it, is the wrong way to compare yourself to others. I think a lot of us, myself included, even if we don't want to admit it, have this natural tendency to constantly be comparing ourselves to others. And I know I always go on about this, but the online world exploits this and makes us feel terrible about ourselves. You know, you've got something you're good at, a sport or a skill, well, here's the algorithm showing you 100 people better than you in the space of 10 minutes. You've started a new course you're excited about, or a job that's paying you nicely, well, here's another 100 people telling you why you should have picked something else, and how they're making so much more in their career. It becomes so hard both to have faith that you have any skill to begin with, and also to stay grounded and focus on one thing, your thing. And if you let this overwhelm you and keep jumping around, you'll lose your identity and vanish. And you don't have to be a genius for this to happen to you. In fact, it very nearly happened to me. Going back to that bizarre intro I had, in this channel's early days, back when my videos were only getting a few hundred views, I couldn't help but notice other channels were getting quite literally 1,000 times this. And this drove me insane at the time because I could tell these videos were far quicker to make than mine. But this was also around the time my car's engine had just gone up in smoke, and I was working 2 jobs at a time, so I didn't have time to sleep, let alone make videos. And yet I sacrificed sleep in order to do so. All the while in my head I was thinking, as I looked at these other channels, oh, this is such lazy content, it's so bad, who even watches this? But this panel of Kaiser in chapter 171 sums it up perfectly. I was jealous of the success and circumstances these other channels had, but because I couldn't face my own weakness, I tried to find fault in others who had succeeded. And he's right, it was a repulsive, stupid emotion. I was so caught up in all these negative thoughts that I couldn't look at myself and realize I was weak, not the other channels, me. The real reason these videos were taking so long to make wasn't that I didn't have much time, because even after my car got fixed and my hours reduced, the upload rate didn't really increase at all. The issue was I wasn't using the time I had effectively. I got way too distracted. I spent too long on parts which weren't important for the video because I was putting off harder parts. And before I knew it, I was starting to run away from my ideals, as Kaiser puts it. In a way, I was a lot like Barou in the 3v3, hence why I was in the intro so much. He felt entitled to win because he was talented, and I felt entitled to win because I was foolishly, sacrificing sleep to work on videos. We were both being complete donkeys, not looking at what we needed to do to improve, instead just getting frustrated and taking it out on others. And whilst this isn't relevant to Barou, for me, this constant comparison took a lot of the enjoyment out of the channel until I got over this, which was easier said than done, to be completely honest, you know. It's straight up cringe looking back, but at the time I couldn't tame this jealousy within me, and that blinded me to the fact that there's more than one way to make it. If we go back to that panel of Crush Prince earlier, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Because I could see these other types of content doing so much better than mine, I almost considered switching over. I didn't understand the mechanism of my own talents, that the videos I was making were going to do fantastic, but just needed some time. And if I'd blindly made that switch, if I became a reaction channel, for example, I would suck at it. Being entertaining and lively is definitely not a strength of mine. If I'd given into that jealousy, this channel would have vanished into nothing long ago. However, despite all I've said and all we get told about how we shouldn't compare ourselves to others, I actually disagree. I think there is a good way to compare ourselves to others, and that is perfectly demonstrated by the main man himself, Isagi Yoichi. It would have been so easy for him to just see Kaiser doing better than him and get lost in all these negative thoughts about how arrogant he is and how Isagi should be doing better for X, Y, and Z. But instead he looks at Kaiser and thinks, okay, what is this guy doing that I'm not? And it seems like Kaiser has two main advantages, his Kaiser impact and a thought process Isagi can't currently understand. I know he wasn't there when Prince said this, but he doesn't give in to that urge to change his course, nor does he doubt his talent for a second. He's fully aware something like the Kaiser impact just isn't the kind of thing he's built for. Comparing himself to that is a complete waste of time. Instead, he looks at Kaiser's thought process. Rather than endlessly hating like I did a few months back, instead he looks at him to see what he can learn from Kaiser and apply himself. In doing so, Isagi strikes that perfect ego where he doesn't automatically assume he's above everyone else, as many people would associate with the word ego. Instead, Isagi looks at someone doing better than him, acknowledges that they are, and knows he will be above them someday. Then goes about figuring out how he's going to get there, instead of just assuming he will. This is actually what he's done throughout the entire series basically perfectly. It's best demonstrated in the 2v2 of Naruhaya and Barou, which I still consider to be the most important match for Isagi because it's where he really started to apply what we spoke about today. He looked at what Barou was doing and realized that that's just not him. It's not Isagi. He's not a brute powerhouse like Barou is. So instead looks at Naruhaya, and rather than getting caught up in, oh, I should be doing better than this no-name, he's just getting carried, he tried to see what he was doing that he currently wasn't. And of course, we know how well that went. So let's get back to the part you were all waiting for. Manshine City versus the monetized Munchen. The first goal comes from Chigiri, who is also a fantastic example of everything we've said so far. He looks at players with similar strengths, namely Barou or Zantetsu, and tries to figure out what they're doing that he can use. In particular, he looks at his past successes to see what the best way to use this idea is. Having figured this out before the game, he uses speed to zip past Isagi and Kunigami to enter his zone and snipe away the first goal. With a pretty insane shot when you actually look at it. The curve he managed to get on the ball was nuts. Kaiser taunts Isagi, who's clearly starting to get frustrated. He tries to make a play happen with Corona, which is then blocked by Kaiser and cleared by Chigiri. The ball goes back and forth between the two teams for a bit, and as Isagi watches Kaiser intercept Nagi's shot, he accepts that he just can't match Kaiser currently, and begins watching him to see what he can learn. As Kaiser blasts home an equalizer that seems to slip past the entire Manshine defense, everyone else comments on how impressive the Kaiser impact is, but Isagi realizes that wasn't it at all, as he finally grasps something he can apply for himself. Metavision. Using his peripheral vision to see more of the field at once. As Isagi's brain lights up and begins scanning for weak spots in enemy defense, begins a series of quick one-twos. And it works wonders, with Isagi and Corona slipping past the entire Manshine team, except for Kaiser, who blocks Isagi's shot, forcing him to aim for the very corner, where Kunigami steals his goal, and Isagi's anger explodes. Whilst he argues with his former teammate, Nagi and Ryo team back up again, leading to Nagi's ridiculous 5-stage fake volley to level things back up at 2-all. As Prince and Noah sub in, the game gets into its final moments with the world's top 2 strikers facing off against each other. Eventually, Chigiri gets the ball and passes to Prince, who launches a skillful knuckleball that Gagamaru doesn't have a clue how to respond to. It seems like it's game over, but Isagi perfectly, at lightning speed, coordinates the defense with him going high and Gagamaru going low. And honestly, I think this is one of the most impressive feats of the entire series. Even the slightest delay would have made it too slow, yet whilst everyone else stopped and watched, Isagi calculated a very unorthodox way to defend against a shot that everyone else pretty much gave up on. He clears the ball and play begins once more, as Isagi and Corona make their way up Manshine's half until Yukimiya steals the ball off Isagi, claiming he's running out of time. He blazes through Manshine's defense and fires off a shot before Prince blocks it, as Jinpachi comments on how success won't come to those who blind themselves. I hope the pun wasn't intended, but he's completely right. As Yukimiya argues with Isagi, he reminds me of how I used to be, insulting those he's jealous of, claiming how messed up it is that Isagi's rewarded and he isn't. And his frustrations are perfectly valid. The hand he's been dealt is harsh. His situation is so much tougher than those around him, but it's precisely because of that he can't waste his time on thoughts like this. It is unfair, it's brutally unfair, but if all you do is fantasize, you will sink beneath those with the guts to look at reality and accept their own weaknesses, fair or otherwise. And although this was before the match, and he did seem to lose his way a bit, this panel, where he realizes what he's doing, gave me a ton of respect for him. He realizes the situation sucks, but he also realizes that there's so much more he could be doing instead. And if he can do that with his eyes going, then me and you definitely can too. Anyway, back to the match. With the clock ticking, Isagi begins his last attack, but soon realizes that with his physical specs being what they are, and half his own team out to steal the ball off him, he doesn't have a clear route. Until the number 1 himself, Noah, shows up and declares himself Isagi's ally. With the current king of strikers beside him, the pitch lights up for Isagi as he passes the ball to Noah and presses onwards with one single thought in his head: to crush Kaiser, who then shows up to try to stop Isagi, only to fall a step behind as Isagi reads him like a book, using Noah to get himself past Kaiser. Chigiri shows up out of nowhere to slow him down, but even he's not fast enough. Nagi tries to stop him, but even he's not nimble enough. Yukimiya tries to steal the ball, but even he can't block him. The whole pitch is Isagi's chessboard as he flies through the defense with no one able to stop his attack. Except for the one man Isagi was actually playing against this whole time. Kaiser takes no half measures, barging straight into Isagi, knocking him off balance and ruining his plans. Or at least, that was the idea. Yukimiya surges forwards, a million thoughts swarming around his head, but just one thing in his line of sight. He is going to score. The final boss turns out to be Ryo, of all players, who read Isagi's plan and moves into position to block it. But even with metavision, no one could have predicted the phenomenal shot Yukimiya launched, which slips past Ryo to clinch the match for Munchen, as Kaiser can only watch in horror as Isagi's masterpiece unfolds with Kaiser the Clown. Next up is a similar video for Noah, so be sure to sub if you don't want to miss that. Obviously this was my first manga video, so I was trying a couple things out editing wise. Hopefully it was okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, bro. Hope you have a great day.